This presentation is on medieval and early modern concepts of witchcraft and witch hunts. And these ideas about witchcraft are actually what led to witch hunts in many situations. And the aspect of this that has to do with the term occult, as discussed in this class, or magic as discussed in this class, is that the witch hunts were driven by occult beliefs regarding a secret or hidden magical group of witches who were operating under the direction of Satan in order to overthrow a God-ordained, in most cases Christian, government system or social system. So this idea was very, very prominent during the medieval ages and also during the early modern era. And it's not that witch hunts broke out everywhere all the time, but witch hunts were far more common than one might think in this time period. As I talked, you might have noticed that I said there was this idea that witches were working with Satan to overthrow God-ordained governmental systems or social systems. And one of the ways to point out sort of the political nature of these beliefs is to look at the gunpowder plot of November 1605. The gunpowder plot we'll go into in a bit more detail, but just if you see here from this publication from the time period, it says that this gunpowder plot was a bloody and subtle design laid against the king, his lords and commons in parliament, and of a happy deliverance by divine power. And so the idea here is that Satan attempted to overthrow the government using diabolical means, but the King James and his members of parliament were saved by a divine force. And that statement in itself has a lot in common with the ideas of witches as being part of a group of satanically driven radicals whose goal is to undermine Christianity. So the gunpowder plot took place November 5th, 1605. It also is referred to as the Jesuit treason. And if you've seen the movie Vendetta, you may be familiar with this rhyme. Remember, remember the 5th of November, gunpowder treason and plot. We see no reason why gunpowder treason should ever be forgot. So this statement is urging people to remember this horrible event. And the details of it are that there were a group of Jesuits who were responding to some anti-Catholic rulings that were made by King James I and Parliament. And their response to this was to cook up a plan to blow up Parliament. And the plot was discovered and foiled literally minutes before it was enacted by the people who came up with the plan. And as head of the English Church, James I and other religious leaders presented this prevention as a divine prevention of an apocalyptic event arranged by the devil and witches who were, by setting out to attack the king, were also attacking God's plan for the world. The accusations against the gunpowder plotters at the trials were riddled with words and phrases that brought up English law, and in particular English laws as they relate to charges against witchcraft in the time period. Lord Coke claimed that the gunpowder plot was hatched at a black mass, where hell's aid was secured by sacrilegious oaths and rites. And in particular, he said that the Jesuit plotters had impiously and devilishly profaned the sacrament. By that, he means they profaned the bread and the wine of the Eucharist. that represents the body and the blood of Christ. They did this by taking a vow to destroy the king and using the Eucharist as part of their process of taking this vow. Lancelot Andrewes described the Plotters' Mass as a religious missal, sacramental treason that was hallowed with orison, oath, and Eucharist. And so that description of using the Eucharist as a way to take an oath to overthrow the king was presented in language that people would have recognized as an accusation of witchcraft under Elizabethan law, because witches were said to profane the sacraments and elements of Christian ritual. And this also would define those who were accused of practicing these acts as witches. So in the Middle Ages and all through the early modern era as well, witchcraft, Satanism, and the occult were perceived as part of the war, a war waged by Satan against Christian rule of law, God-ordained rule of law. In the year of the gunpowder plot, these things were associated, witchcraft, Satanism, the occult, were all associated with perceived political and religious enemies. And the public feeling about gunpowder at this time was tied into their feelings about the apocalypse. Gunpowder was viewed as a horrible, frightening weapon of fire, and it was viewed sort of the way that many millenarian Christians of the present view nuclear wars, a nuclear weapon, in relationship to the apocalypse. So in 1605, witchcraft was presented as and accepted as a reality by many people, and it was used by politicians to identify enemies of the state. Now, speaking of identifying enemies of the state and witches, the methods for finding witches had been being developed in Europe from the 12th century on. But in the 15th century, specifically in 1486, a Catholic clergyman named Heinrich Kramer published a book called Malleus Maleficarum, which was a widely distributed and very popular book. It became the primary manual for witch hunting in the 15th through the 17th centuries. And in this book, Kramer advocated for capturing, interrogating, torturing, and exterminating people who were accused of being witches, because witches were assumed to truly be in league with Satan and a danger to morality and the order of law. The book gives descriptions of amazing witch powers and horrible activities that they were said to undertake. It offers explanations for why God allows witchcraft to exist in the first place. And this manual was used by both Protestants and Catholics as the go-to form for how to deal with witches for more than 2 centuries after its publication. And in the Malleus Maleficarum, some very detailed information is given on legends concerning the Black Sabbath, or another term for this is the Black Mass. So in the Black Mass, witches were said to be transported in fantastical ways to the Mass. The Malleus Maleficarum says that there are magicians who are often carried through the air by devils for long distances, and indeed it must be confessed that such things can happen not only to those who are awake, but also to men who are asleep. Namely, they can be bodily transported through the air while they're fast asleep. So these fantastical methods of flying are often thought of as ways of the witch traveling to the Black Mass, where they would meet Satan. And Satan demanded some strange behavior in order to pay him proper homage. In 1617, there was a witch trial, and it said, in testimonial of activities of the Black Mass, it was said that Satan offers his back parts to be kissed. And in another confession that was extracted from Marion Grant of Aberdeen in 1597 under the torture, it was said that Satan caused the kiss him in diverse parts and worship him on thy knees as thy Lord. So there was this belief that when witches were transported to the Black Mass, they had to honor Satan by touching him and kissing him in parts of the body that normally we wouldn't even look at. Black Sabbath continued. There in another part of the Malleus Maleficarum, there is a list of some testimonies against one Margaret Ogg of the Aberdeen witches, and it says that on Hallow Even last, and there, accompanied by thine own 2 daughters and certain others, your devilish adherents and companions, ye danced together about a great stone, under the conduct of Satan, your master, along space. So this was somebody claiming that Margaret Ogg had in fact taken her daughters to a black mass and danced for a long time with Satan because he commanded them to dance. And this idea of Satan commanding the people at his mass to dance was very, very popular concept in courts of witchcraft. And 2 of the popular forms of dance that were often brought up were the ring dance, dancing in a circle, and the follow the leader dance, where people follow people sort of in a line. One of the other aspects of the Black Mass is strange music, in particular strange singing. At one case at Innerkit, it was said that the devil sung to witches and that they all danced. And in a 1610 case, it was said that magicians and those that can read sing certain psalms as they do in the church, transferring all the praise of Lucifer and the devils. So what that means is they would read psalms, but in references where points of the psalm where it addressed God or the Lord, they would replace that with the name of Lucifer or some other devils, or Lucifer and the devils. And it also was said at the same trial that the hags and sorcerers do howl and vary their hellish cries high and low, counterfeiting a kind of villainous music. So there was this idea of musicians coming in, some of them bring violins or other instruments, and then they would play music, and the witches present would sing in disturbing, strange, howling ways, and so making sort of a music that the devil could enjoy. Gratification of food and of sex was a big recurring theme in accounts of what happens at the Black Mass. In one document called Pleasant Treatise of Witches, done in 1673, it was said that at the Mass people sit to table where no delicate meats are wanting to gratify their appetites, all dainties being brought in the twinkling of an eye by those spirits that attend the assembly. So apparently the devil is there with his witches and their attendant demons that magically make all this amazing food and drink appear. And then there's also strange, perverse game performances that are often performed by the devils to entertain their followers. So one involved candles. In another witch trial, a wife of a person named Barton described a witch meeting in Pentland Hills, and she said, "And coming down the hill when we had done, which was the best sport, he, the devil, carried the candle in his bottom under his tail, which played wig wag." And so she's giving this really comic description of a devil with a tail coming down a hill with a candle in his rectum, waving it back and forth. And this perverse entertainment was again viewed as highly satanic and blasphemous by the people who were questioning the witches in this time period. Another legendary report regarding the Black Masses was that the devil would demand at the Black Mass that people desecrate sacraments of the church. Here's an image from Malleus Maleficarum of somebody trampling across at the devil's command. At one trial, it was said that in rifling the closet of a lady, they found a wafer of sacramental bread that had the devil's name stamped on it instead of Jesus Christ. And so they took this as a sign that she had been to the Black Mass. And then it was also reported that sometimes corrupt priests or defrocked priests might perform evil masses at the behest of the devil. So in one 1678 report, It was said that the devil had a great meeting of witches in Loudan, where among others was a warlock who formerly had been admitted to the ministry, but being found wicked was deposed, and now he turns a preacher under the devil of hellish doctrine. For the devil at this time preaches to his witches, really, if I may so term it, the doctrine of the infernal pit, and blasphemies against God and his son Christ. So there was this idea of inverting the sacraments and the practices of the church in the Black Mass. In a 1920s book called Witch Cult in Western Europe, an anthropologist named Margaret Alice Murray wrote about 4 forms of sacrifice that witches were often accused of in the witch trials. One was a blood sacrifice in which the witch made an offering of his or her own blood to the devil. And then there was the sacrifice of an animal. And then there was the sacrifice of a human being, and that was usually a child or an infant. And sometimes there was a sacrifice of the holy host of the Eucharist. At a Scottish trial, people there were warned that if there be any children unbaptized or not guarded with the sign of the cross, then the witches may or do catch them from their mother's sides in the night or out of their cradles, or otherwise kill them with their ceremonies. So this suggests that if you do not baptize your infant or your child, they're in danger of being snatched by a witch and sacrificed to the devil at a black mass. And so again, these were popular ideas about the nature of witches. And it was also said quite often that witches ate children as part of their evil rituals. So these scary ideas about witches resulted in, or were used as justification for extreme persecutions of people who were accused of being witches. One of the most famous incidents of a entire town that underwent a witch craze and created a huge series of witch trials was the story of Salem, Massachusetts in 1692 in North America. So in this time period, it was before the establishment of the United States, and a group of people, mostly Puritans, of course, had come to America not only to escape the religious tyranny of England and the Church of England in particular, but to establish their own New Jerusalem in North America, and they viewed this as part of a divine plan. They viewed Catholicism, the Puritans, as misguided Christianity at best. However, as far as witchcraft was concerned, they adhered to many of the ideas that were presented in Kramer's Malleus Maleficarum, even though he was Catholic. And in particular, the Puritans of Salem believed that Satan had a particular interest in thwarting their project of creating a Christian North America. And so they had tied Satan and the apocalypse. They had identified this as a force that was against their project that God, in their opinion, had charged them to pursue. At the Salem witch trials, which were begun when a group of young girls began accusing people in the Salem community of bewitching them with witchcraft, the young girls who were doing the accusing displayed some striking behavior at the witch trials. They went into catatonic fits, which means they would go stiff as a board and hold a position without moving or speaking. They would begin wailing and screaming, and bite marks mysteriously appeared on arms. There were some reports of people saying they saw the girls when they were having fits biting their own arms, but then other people claimed that they didn't see that. And then they were accusing, the young girls would say that they could see spectral bodies in the space watching the trial, and sometimes even the person on the platform who was accused of being witch, they would say they could see that person's spectral body in the room. And then they would direct men with swords to kill spectral bodies in the room, and the men would in fact do that. And in the Salem witch trials, there were 24 deaths in total, 19 hangings, including a minister. There was one person, Giles Corey, who was killed by stone pressing, which means putting a board on your body, laying you on the ground, and lying stones on the board until the person is crushed. And then 4 died in prison from sickness and the conditions, which were horrible. And in Salem, 150 to 185 men, women, and children were accused of witchcraft, and 55 confessed under interrogation and the tortures of being imprisoned. So the witch persecutions of Salem were just one of many horrific atrocities that took place in Europe and North America between the 12th century and roughly 1800 in response to imagined cases of witchcraft. I know that there was at least one witch execution that took place as late as 1780s. The persecution of witchcraft was rooted in a belief and a fear of the unknown, and particularly of the power of Satan and his minions to interfere with God's plans for the world. There were many critics who opposed these tortures on the grounds of religion and also on the grounds of logic, but it still happened more than you would think.